Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Lindsey, Byrd and Writing is Hard. Today's interview is all about fantasy world building, characterization, and also how authors can play with the idea of fate in their books. All that and more is yet to come. I hope you enjoy. Today's author interview is with Rachel A. Edwards. Rachel first discovered her love of storytelling at a young age when she got lost in tales of witches, fairies, and magical realms. Hailing from England, she spends most of her days writing fantasy novels about morally gray characters in worlds filled with mythology, corruption, and magic. Her debut novel, A Fate Unwoven, is a YA fantasy which follows Prince Damas. Damas is desperate to legitimize his claim to the throne by capturing Lena, his young heretical storyteller destined to be the Empire's next fate weaver. But Lena will do anything to sever her magical bond to the upstart emperor, even if it means striking a deal with an ancient and vengeful spirit. So to start us off, what inspired you to write this book?
Honestly, it's been such a labor of love, and so many things have gone into it that have inspired it. I think first off, it was kind of the concept of fate in and of itself. Like growing up, I was first introduced to it, probably like many millennials, by the fate in Hercules, and then kind of went on a hyperfixation spiral and looked into different mythologies and different versions, and every pretty much every culture seems to have a different version of the idea of fate and destiny. Um, and then growing up, I kind of went through a period of like chronic illness and really struggled with that. And one of the things that my mum would always say to me was, what's meant to be is meant to be. And that just sparked this kind of concept in my head of, well, if our paths are predetermined, what do our choices matter? And like, what kind of people would decide to just be like, oh, okay, well, it's fate, I'm going to give up, or still fight regardless of that. So that's kind of the theme and core concept that kicked off the idea of the book. And then Lena kind of just popped into my head as this storyteller, because I've also always loved stories about good versus evil, but in a more obscure way, and that history is written by the victors. So I wanted to show that through the medium of storytelling. And it just kind of spiraled into this whole world. And the setting, I suppose that kind of came from a mixture of a bunch of things. I was playing The Witcher at the time, the idea sparked initially. I was watching a lot of Merlin. um, I've I call myself an amateur witch. I practice very sporadically, but I've also been very interested in witchcraft and paganism and living just on the border of Wales. Um, everywhere I go, there are like ruins and features from paganism and old religions and the old gods. And so as the story kind of developed, I wanted to build that into the world and kind of play on the Old English and Celtic idea of back before Christianity and kind of if those tribes or clans still existed, what would happen if an empire basically condemned them and they fought back, which, yeah, so.
There's so much to unpack there, so let's see if we can
It
start
really
at the
is.
beginning.
I rumbled.
No, it gives us lots of stuff to talk about. Um, so when you first mentioned fate,
Mm.
lots of different interpretations and ideas of what fate means. Is it completely predetermined? Is it not predetermined? What is your free choice in it? Um, some beliefs are that you find your future, and then because you find it, you create an alternate timeline or an alternate
Mm.
path where because you know it now you can change it. But there's also thoughts of no, you're absolutely going to do that no matter what. um, within the book or without of the book, how do you feel about fate as far as like if you get a fortune told, it is going to happen, or you might be able to change it?
Yeah, I go back and forth. I think I do believe that some things are meant to happen. I just think the path that you take there, that's up to you and the choices that you make, and that kind of plays into the book as well. Um, and I think the endings can be rewritten depending on what choices you make. Um, so the Fate Weaver in the book, we'll probably go on to talk about it, but her abilities, she can only kind of manipulate threads of fate to shift to another path that's already kind of been written. And only the goddess, Nabia, who kind of rules over the empire, only she really has the ability to completely rewrite a fate, and like cut somebody's life off short. And so a lot of that is played with, and um, everyone in the book kind of has different beliefs about that as well, much like our own world. So yeah, it was just a concept I really wanted to play with, but to keep it more about the kind of humanity aspect of it, of these characters kind of deciding that, well, whether we can control it or not, like we're still gonna fight to the end, regardless.
You mentioned the three fates from Greek
Mm.
mythology earlier, and they famously have the thread of fate. Is that where you get the fate weaver from and how she uses thread, or did it evolve from something else as well?
Yeah, so initially growing up, obviously it was the Hercules thread, and then I was very into the Norns. Like I love them in God of War. I just love the concept of them. And there are versions of them throughout history and different cultures, and I didn't want to take from a specific culture. So the way that they exist in the book is kind of an inspiration of a variety of things, from the Norns to the Old Celtic, and then just my own kind of spin on some things. But yeah, it's just been like a mixture of different mythology and love languages, that's just culminated into the version that they are today.
I think thread is really interesting in this because it's something that so many cultures have as they develop clothing in their own way, they develop different fibers and this and that. And so also when you're looking at it as a grand metaphor,
Mm.
you have one thread, but if that one thread pulls loose, the entire garment might fall apart, the entire tapestry might fall apart. And so it's an interesting way of like when you're talking about how you could weave through something, how
Mm.
you can actually, this one slight change might alter the fate here or there, depending
Yeah.
on how that pulls through.
And then who else's fate does that also alter inadvertently? So, it's a lot about the kind of consequences that you wouldn't think about. And how another thing I kind of play with in the book is how that all weaves into past, present, and future, and how it all kind of weaves together into a bit of an unlinear line. So that was really fun to play with. Yeah.
It sounds really fun to play with, especially because when you're telling a story, I mean, as authors, we tend to also be weaving in different narratives, different character arcs, different this, and different that. So there are metaphors upon metaphors.
Oh, so many metaphors.
You mentioned setting earlier and where you were getting your inspiration. How do you pull your setting to actually build the world in the book itself?
I think that's one of the things that's changed the most through edits, and that I've worked on the most, is kind of upping the world building, making it deeper and richer. The initial kind of spark of the idea has changed so much, and also not at the same time. Um, I think it was because where I started it, it just naturally started going in the kind of um, old English and Celtic Welsh paganism kind of direction, and pivoting away from what it initially started as. So as I was going through edits with my editor, I really started looking into that and sort of suggested it to them, and they were like, "Oh yeah, I think this is the setting that was kind of that it's going towards, and that it was always meant to be. So let's like really go in on it." Um, so for me, it's a lot of research. I love research. I'm a big mythology nerd. I love world building in general. A big gamer, so I love like big, vast, open RPG worlds. So for me, a lot of that came into it. Um, Doing kind of the worksheets of what's the magic system, what's the political situation, what's I think a lot of it for me was what was the past as well, like what sparked the start of this empire and the origins of it. And again, that led very much into the it's written by the victors. So this idea of religion that we have at the start of the book, that's the norm and that people are kind of meant to follow, might not be as good as everyone wants them to think.
Well, it's fun when we're creating these giant worlds. We're looking at them in the moment of within the narrative itself, but all of those worlds have their individual histories. So, what came first? Who were those ancestors? How does that influence the culture? I got into a conversation with someone a few days ago about how the geography or the geology of a particular area all feed into the culture that would be born from that area, which then would eventually lead to religion and politics and this and that. And so, even though it may not be the focus of the book, all of
Mhm.
that stuff helps inform the characters. All of that stuff informs why they make the choices they make in the world that they're making them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the big things about the setting is the kind of wintry, frozen aspect of it, um, which for some reason was just always there in my head. Kind of, so Nabia, who is the goddess of fate, the single goddess of fate, according to the Warisian religion, um, in the mythology I did, the elder sister of fate was always kind of the personification of death and the end of life and cutting that final thread. And to me, that's also associated with winter and the end of life cycles. So a lot of that built into the setting and kind of visuals and atmosphere of this world.
What was your favorite part about designing this particular world?
Ooh. I think I think writing the backstory lore, I don't know whether that's again my video game like D&D kind of nerdy side, but I have maybe one day I'll release them, who knows. I have like excerpts of journals from kind of like the first Fate Weaver and stuff like that that I did as a side project to myself to just help me build that world, and I had so much fun with that.
When we first sat down to actually have this conversation, you'd mentioned that the story was very character driven.
Mm.
Um, for those who aren't aware, what would be the difference between a character driven story and a plot driven story?
Um, so I think there's there's lots of different descriptions out there of what it is, and my description isn't right or wrong. It's just kind of how I personally interpret it. So to me, a plot-driven story is more about the external events that happen, and the character kind of being led by them. Whereas a character-driven story is more about the internal thoughts and feelings and emotions of a character and how they react to that. So I always use the Hunger Games as a really good example of a character-driven story, because even though it has so much plot going on outside, it's Katniss's choices that make things unfold the way that they do. Like if she'd never volunteered, it wouldn't be a book.
Do you find yourself particularly drawn to writing character driven stories?
I do, I do. I just characters are the first kind of, as much as I love worlds and world building, characters are the first things that I latch onto, and then the things that I obsess over the most in video games and books and other kinds of media. So I love that, and I love exploring kind of how our, let's get deep and psychological here, but how our upbringing and the deep-rooted kind of desires that we have that we might not even be aware of, how they all impact every single choice that we make. And kind of becoming aware of that, and then changing it if we need to work on ourselves, or learning to live with it, and that other people can love us in spite of it, all that kind of stuff. I love it. Well,
When you're designing the main character in a character-driven story, do you go in and like write the background beforehand? Do you know before you even start off exactly what you're going to do? I guess, are you more of a plotter or a pantser when it comes to that?
I initially started as a pantser, and have learned that I need to be a plotter. So now I'm very much a plotter. With characters, yeah, I these days I don't start drafting until I know as much as I feel I need to know about my character. And for me, that primarily comes down to what is it this character wants, both externally, so within the world, within the plot, and internally within themselves. And what do they fear? Again, both externally and internally. And then, how is this journey that they go on? How is it going to challenge those things and change them? And where are they going to end up? Again, both externally and internally.
What about the voice? Like
Mm.
when you're trying to really bring the character's voice that the reader can understand and really get into their head and understand this is where I'm going, this is how I'm getting there. How do you work on building that into your story?
Mm. That's a tricky question. I think I'm going to be really annoying and vague and just say reading and writing as much as like physically possible. You find your voice through your craft. Obviously, every book is different, whether you write in first or third, and every character is different. So for me, aspects of a character's personality will irrevocably kind of impact the voice of the story. Well, if the character's sassy, then the reactions and the thoughts are going to be more sassy and quick-witted. If they're more kind of introverted and anxious, like Tomas is, we're going to spend a lot of time in his head because he's always thinking about things. So yeah, for me, that's a combination of just writing, reading, and playing with different personalities and characters. And one thing I do, which is maybe silly, but I sometimes just write myself little fanfics. Like if I can't figure out a voice of a character, I'll just be like, okay, well, these are their key personality points. These are their wants and their fears. Let's put them in a situation randomly that will really challenge them, or just a really fun situation, and then play with how they'd react and think. And then that can kind of help me troubleshoot the actual book.
When you're putting the characters in situations,
Mm.
the relationships they have with those other characters are also really important. How do you build up those relationship dynamics? How do you really emphasize which ones are important, which ones are maybe not so important, but also make sure that the characterization stays fluid throughout?
Mm. I think all of the relationships that I try and show as important in some way, because I think any relationship we have with someone, if they're close to us or even not so close to us, they can have impacts on the way we view the world without us even kind of realizing it. Obviously, there are the core relationships, and for me, I'm a big slow burn person, so any romance in here is very slow burn. Apologies in advance. Um,
No, it's fine.
all the pining. Um, but yeah, I think it's kind of a natural thing as I write. It's not Romance isn't something I kind of plot. Like originally in the very first draft of this book, Damas had a completely different love interest. And then his love interest in this version kind of popped on the page, and I was like, oh, well, this is happening. Um,
All
but
that
yeah,
flipping.
yeah, it's just well, I'm gonna go with it. But I just try and make it as real as possible. And I don't know whether it's because I identify as maybe Demi, I'm still figuring stuff out, but I really love characters to just have a really deep emotional bond, even platonic ones, and like a shared goal or view of the world that they really bond over, or trauma bonding, because we all love trauma bonding in books. So I think a lot of that plays into it, and then sometimes it's just fun, like just a bit of banter. Um, yeah.
The slow burn is definitely not for everybody, but there are definitely people who do enjoy it. With my book, I have the good grace to have two books. But unfortunately, what that means is that for people who are expecting a romance on page in the first book, not
It's so
happening.
slow.
I am like glacially slow. Like
Yeah.
it is a very slow burn. With the payoff in the second, but
Mm,
you have to have all of that build up
absolutely.
when you're trying to get the characters in your page count, getting them to there, showing those emotional buildups and connections where they find, this is our point in common. We may not be romantically
Mm,
involved just yet, but we're growing that respect, that appreciation, that care for the other person. What
mm,
type of scenes do you particularly want to show on page to like really emphasize that? And then also, how do you slowly pull in that yearning that will
mm.
eventually lead towards that happy conclusion?
Yeah, it definitely is tricky in a certain amount of word count. I think I'm lucky in some respects with this book because it spans over a slightly longer period than if it was like a 24-hour fast-paced, action. Um, so the characters kind of did have the time to slow down and have intimate and quieter moments. But in terms of things that I like to see on the page, I think I like I think a common thread, see what I did there, people will notice for love interests or characters that I'm building an important relationship with is that they will likely be seen at their most vulnerable, and the other character will support them in some way, um, show them that they can be loved despite how much they might hate a certain part about themselves. I love those kind of things. Again, common goals, like we're fighting for the same thing. Um, so yeah, there's probably my kryptonite when it comes to character development and relationship development.
For your characters themselves, what type of dynamics do you like to see them either display with other people or just in general for your characterization?
Um, I like I like betrayal. No, that's that makes me sound terrible.
No, seriously, like what is it about betrayal that's interesting?
I don't I don't know. I think the thing that I like about it is that it seems so black and white, but there's often so much more to the story. Um, so a character might immediately be betrayed, and the initial reaction to that will obviously be bad. I've been betrayed, but if they get a chance to kind of see the other side, it doesn't mean they necessarily forgive the character for what they've done, but they can understand in some ways the choices that they've made. I mean, some people just do it because they're absolutely horrible people, and that happens. But I love the idea of like the moral complexities of humanity and villains and why they make the choices that they do, and to them they're the hero of the story, they're not the villain, so they're not doing anything wrong in their mind, which, I mean, it's very clear that they are doing something wrong from the point of view of the main characters, but, you know, I just love playing with the moral dynamics.
Well, there's scales of betrayal.
Mm,
There's small little friendship betrayal. There's the kid who shoves the other kid into the pool. There's relationship betrayals
Mhm.
where a lover betrays their significant other.
Mhm.
There's grand scale betrayals
Yeah.
where a country turns around and just says, nope, you're done, and
Nope.
sacrifices a bunch of people.
Yeah.
With those scales of betrayal, there's also scales of forgiveness.
Mm.
You
Absolutely.
can decide, okay, that person, they may have pushed me in the pool, but I'll get them next time. Which may not be total forgiveness, a little bit of retribution involved.
I think that's a
Um,
grudge.
well, yeah, you get the
Many
grudges
people in
involved as
this
well.
book, yeah, they have.
How do you decide as an author when something is completely unforgivable, when redemption is required, when the grudge is necessary, or when it's something that you know you're just going to move on and just that's it, cut that person off, no contact, that's the end.
Yeah.
How do you decide that?
Oh, I mean, in terms of big kind of moral betrayals, to me they're not forgivable, but that's, I make it very clear that oppressing people is not good and not forgivable. But in terms of smaller betrayals or um, the different dynamics of betrayals, it kind of comes down to the characters and how they'll respond in general. Um, so Lena, for example, is quite closed off and quite afraid of being hurt and abandoned. So betrayal to her, she holds a grudge. And if she kind of, for her, I think the forgiveness is her learning that holding onto the grudge isn't serving anyone. Like it's not serving her, it's not serving. So she's not necessarily forgiving the person for them. It's more about healing. Um, Whereas maybe not so much in this book, but in other books, I have characters who are a little bit more forgiving. But yeah, it really, really, really does just depend on the kind of betrayal and the scale of betrayal, and the circumstances surrounding the betrayal as well. So it's a very vague answer.
No, it's not vague at all. I think it's something that authors, writers, readers, they all come at it from different points of view.
Mm.
And their own emotional response to reading the scene or engaging with the scene, I think would change as well. So, for instance, a reader might see a character forgive somebody and be like, why would you forgive that person?
Yeah,
I would never forgive them. And then they're angry at the character for making a
exactly.
choice that they personally might not have made. Um, do you keep audience expectations in mind when you make those types of choices, or is it just you know the character and that's the choice the character would
Mm.
make?
I think it's more the second one. Sorry, audience. Um, I probably do on subconscious level think as a reader as well. Like if I was the audience for this, would this really annoy me? Would it be believable? But whatever choice I make, I think because I'm such a character-driven writer, and we do spend a lot of time in my characters' heads, which isn't a style of writing that is for everyone, but hopefully the people who like it will find the book and enjoy it. But every choice that is made, I made sure we know why, like emotionally, logically, we know why that character has made that choice so that even if we don't agree with it, we can understand it.
Earlier, we talked about how you really enjoy writing morally gray characters.
Mm-hmm.
What is the spectrum of morally gray, and how does that differ from pure or pure good or pure bad?
Mm. Oh, this is a tricky question and probably a very controversial one. And I'm going to caveat with this is fiction. um, but I personally, I do have a very strong moral compass. So I think I'm never gonna personally write kind of extreme enemies to lovers, or like forgiveness of really evil things, which again I know differs for everybody, and I'm not going to go into that, but I think, sorry, you stumped me with this one. Again, I think it's just the I like to understand why people make the choices that they do. So if somebody is making a choice purely because they believe that somebody shouldn't exist, then that, to me, that's evil. It's not forgivable. If somebody's maybe had their whole family torn away from them and, wants revenge for that, then again, I still might not say that revenge is the answer, but I can understand it more, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, it's
So,
kind of like that meme where it's a cool motive, still murder.
yeah, exactly. It's still murder. We're not condoning murder. And I think that's also one thing that I do try and portray in this book, is that killing is a last resort for my characters. And I know that's very difficult in fantasy and war, but it's a last resort, and I do try and make sure that it has that emotional impact, because taking a life should never be easy. And I think it would take something away from the character as well, and change them. So yeah, I definitely wanted to make sure that that impact was felt and it wasn't kind of brushed over, I suppose. Yeah.
On the other side of morally gray, though, are also the characters who are mostly fundamentally good, but they
Mm.
tend to do a couple of weird things every once in a while that might dip them out of, the pure white
Yeah.
spectrum. How does that type of character show up? Maybe not on page in your book, but in general, like how would you approach that type of morally gray character?
Mm. I think now that you said it, I think those are more the morally grey characters that I write than like pure villain morally grey. Um, because no one's perfect. Like, we all mess up. And to me, it kind of goes back again to that internal wants and fears. Sometimes we're reacting out of trauma, sometimes we're reacting out of just upbringing and ways we've been taught to react, that can make us a complete a-hole. And, that can make them morally questionable. So again, I think for me, it's like the reason behind it, and then also the willingness to learn and change and realize that your viewpoint or the way that you react to things might not actually be right, and it might be hurting people.
Is there a goal, do you think, for morally gray characters to swing closer towards one end of the spectrum or the other over the course of their character arc? Or do you think it's fun just to leave them as the complex characters they are without changing their position on the scale of morality?
Again, I think it probably depends on the character. I've loved both kinds of characters, in books and other kinds of media, and yeah, it really, really just depends. Again, vague, but
What are some of your favorite characters that have influenced maybe how you've written your own characters?
um, so for Lena, I would say that she's very much influenced by kind of the Siri, Lara Croft, like Survivor Huntress type, um, but with a lot of insecurities that cause her to act the way that she does. Um, I'm a big I'm a big fan, other than the final season of the show, The 100. And I love the way that that show plays with moral complexity and the idea of humanity, and if there are good guys, if there are bad guys. So I think a lot of the kind of dynamics and situations and characters in that influenced not just Lena, but the book as a whole and the variety of characters. Um, who else? I mean, Damas, he's my soft prince boy. He definitely has a bit of kind of Zuko in him from Avatar. Um, yeah, the kind of classic, you've been grown up to believe a certain thing, but you've always known that it's not quite right, and then what are you going to do about that kind of character? Um, yeah, there's a variety of there's probably I don't know how to class that the stereotype of it, but the kind of more bantery character that hides behind a mask of charm, but has a lot of insecurities deeper down. So just yeah, just a bunch of things all coming together.
When you're writing a book, um, do you think about the reader's reaction at all, or are you just, I'm going to write this book, I'm going to write the story, and then what happens happens?
I definitely do think about the reader's reactions. I think if there's something I really, really want to happen, then it'll happen. But I still keep in mind that primarily once I'm done with this book and it's out in the world, it's not for me anymore, it's for the readers. So I do keep that in mind, and I do try and make any decisions something that I personally, as a reader, would want to see on a page, and hopefully other readers would too. Sometimes sometimes I do things and they're probably like, why did you kill them? And I'm like, but you know, I'll get over it.
What would you like for your readers to take away from this book when they finish setting it down?
Mm, I think just I mean, generally, I just want them to enjoy it and have a good time. And hopefully, you really like the characters and the journey they go on and find it kind of believable or relatable in their own ways. But in terms of going back full circle to the start of the interview with the concept of fate, it's that we can we can control certain aspects. Our choices matter. You know, where no matter where we're predetermined or not predetermined to end up, do good, make good choices, don't commit a murder.
Well, I mean, I think there's an interesting element to the complexity between free will and fate, because if it depends on how you assess or analyze fate. If you think fate is just this is what's going to happen and that's just that, there's a element of this is going to happen because you are who you are. This is going to happen because you made the choices that you made, and that is going to lead to this result. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction, and that is your fate. And so it's an interesting way of looking at it, because if you say it's fate, it's predetermined, you will make those choices because someone on high said you're going to make it. And then, yeah, you can say, well, I'm completely, I have no responsibility in my own actions. I'm innocent in everything because some other force decided that I was just going to do this. But that rejects your own complicity in those actions. I mean,
Yeah.
unless you have actually been mind controlled and you're just, a puppet somewhere. I mean, I feel like we can give a small bit of credit to those poor
Yeah,
individuals who have literally no control of themselves.
differentiate.
But for everyone else who is not being puppeted by an external factor, the choices you make leads to the fate that you will get because of that type of um, natural reaction. Unless I've completely misinterpreted our
No,
conversation
no,
thus far.
absolutely not. That's pretty much the gist of it. And it's why certain people in the book believe that the fate wheeler shouldn't exist at all, because she can make sure that somebody makes a specific choice by weaving their threads that way. Whereas, people believe that they should be able to make their own choices. No one should have the power to force them into a certain choice. So yeah, that's played with a lot.
I can definitely understand the frustration and the irritation because, like, if you just want to let it go, like, let me do what I'm going to do, don't control my choices,
Yeah.
and having that ownership. But at the same time, there's also a sense of relief in knowing I didn't make that choice. I
Mhm.
wouldn't have made that choice. I did XYZ bad thing, but it wasn't me. It was this. And you can just pass off all of that guilt to something else. So,
Yeah.
or you could lie and say that, fate made me do it, even though it might not have.
I'm sure there are people in this book that would definitely say that. Oh, that's fake.
I was, a perfectly good person. And then, the hand of fate came in and just, made
Yeah.
me push that baby in front of the carriage.
It's not my fault.
I didn't do it. When you
Yeah.
when you think about this book, what is one thing that you absolutely love about it more than anything else?
My characters. Yeah, I started writing this book in the very end of 2016, early 2017, and Lena and Damas have been Lena and Damas the whole way, and they have a very special place in my heart, and I hope people love them as much as I do.
What is it about them that you love so much?
I think it's just that they're, to me anyway, it might not come across this way when people read it, but I tried to make them as complex as people, like as myself, as messed up internally. I'm dealing with things and maybe making the wrong choices, but wanting to do good and trying to do good, even if sometimes maybe things go wrong. Um, so yeah, I love that and that kind of existential view and challenged views of the world of a we live in a world where it's like, well, we're told a lot of the time that this is what's right, by governments or royals, and that doesn't mean it's right. And it's, are you gonna just accept that it's right and stand back, or are you gonna stand up for what you believe in and make it clear that no, this isn't right?
Well, it's a very timely conversation, I
It
think.
really is.
But I think it ties into what we've already been talking about, those shades of moral gray. Is it morally gray to not follow a law? I mean, you get the D&D alignment
Mm,
charts. Are you
yeah, yeah,
lawful
yeah.
good where you follow the law no matter what? Or are you more chaotic? Are you more
Chaotic.
neutral? Where's your flexibility there? Because if you are 100% lawful good, your choices of the law said this, I have to do it. That's the law.
But is that good? That's exactly.
I think it would depend on the law.
Yeah.
And if you live in a society where every single person was lawfully good and you didn't really need the laws because everyone just did it anyway,
Mm,
that's very different from a more realistic society where laws might be made in bad faith, they might be supported in bad faith, they might be enacted in bad faith. And all of that clashes with your civil responsibility, shall we say.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So I think inadvertently I have, maybe not, maybe I meant to, I don't know, but it definitely deals with a lot of that. I think maybe that just stems from the fact that I personally just can't understand how people can't care if people are being hurt or oppressed or anything like that. I won't get too deep into all that kind of stuff on this interview, but yeah, I think I just want to spread the message as much as I can to people that our actions matter, and just because you're told something is the way it should be doesn't mean that that's the way it should be.
As one final question before I let you go, is there anything we haven't talked about that you would like to bring up before we leave?
I don't think so. Just that if you like the sound of any of this, then my book A Fate Unwoven is out on October 14th and you can pre-order it now. The links are in my social media bios. So if you would like to do that, you're very welcome to. And I would appreciate it very much.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us on this week's episode of Lindsey Byrd in Writing is Hard. Rachel A. Edwards' book, A Fate Unwoven, is out on the 14th of October, 2025. Check out the description for more details on how to buy. If you're interested in this content, please do like, share, and subscribe so we can keep making you more. And as always, stay happy and healthy. Bye!